And we are live. Welcome to Literary Salon, learning prose from the pros. I'm Marla Miller from marlamiller.com, and today is episode 3 of Literary Salon, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have Caitlin Rother here. Caitlin is, I'll talk a little bit about who she is and what her pedigree is, and then I'm going to turn it over to her. Caitlin Rother lives in San Diego right now, but she is a true crime author. And she's not just a true crime author, she's a New York Times best-selling true crime author. Caitlin has a history of writing that goes back, I think, maybe even more than 20 years. She started out writing true crime as many true crime authors start out. She worked in newspapers, and I believe she was in a newspaper on the East Coast and then came to San Diego. Her latest book is, hold on, I'll Take Care of You. And the thing about this book that is just so funny to me is I was living in Newport Beach during the time that it's not funny, it's terrible, during the time of this tragedy, and I was just immersed. I couldn't believe that this woman had pulled it off, and here we are a couple of years later, and Caitlin Rother has written a true crime novel about it. Caitlin Rother, welcome to Learning Prose from the Pros. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, good.
Right.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. I'm having a little trouble right now because my internet is kind of going in and out. So if I look like I'm a little stressed, it's because I am. You know. Okay, so Caitlin, I'll Take Care of You is a book that just came out, I think, in January of 2014. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And is this your 9th book? Because I was a little confused by this. It's your 9th book?
It is my 9th book, yes.
But it's not your 9th true crime, correct?
Right, correct. I have a novel, and I have a memoir that I co-authored with someone. That's the New York Times bestseller.
But essentially, you have been in true crime for how many years, Caitlin?
Well, my first book that I wrote was Naked Addiction, which is a crime novel, but I couldn't get it published. So my first book published is Poisoned Love, which is a true crime book. And so that's 2005.
So talk about then that first novel that didn't get published, because I think it eventually did, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was, I think, my 3rd book. So I was working at the newspaper all these years, different newspapers back in Massachusetts, as you said, up in the Ventura County area for the LA-Times, also in that area for the Los Angeles Daily News, and then I came down to the San Diego Union Tribune in 1993. So I worked a total of 19, almost 20 years in newspapers learning that craft. And on the weekends, I was working on my fiction, trying to get my fiction published, which is a very difficult thing, as many of you may know. Writing fiction, nobody wants to take a chance on a first-time author, let alone a fiction author. So as it turned out, I just kept working on it, kept rewriting it, kept trying. 17 years it took me before I got that novel published. And it was only after I was able to publish nonfiction, showed that I had a track record. That book did really well, surprisingly well for my first book, and I'm still benefiting from that. And then I was finally able to get the novel published after that.
And Caitlin, the story that you just shared with us really isn't all that dissimilar from what indie authors today are finding out, and that is that in order to get any kind of attention out here, whether you publish prose yourself or whether you go through traditional publishing, getting books published is really tough. Getting novels published is tougher, and you're probably better off having a portfolio of books, or at least that's one option for authors, is to have a portfolio before you hit. Would you recommend that as well?
Well, actually, yes, because I had a whole contingency plan. So I had this whole thing, the way I wanted it all to work out, and as it turned out, it did work out that way. But I had to really plan carefully and take some risk. I quit a full-time 401k health benefit kind of job to take this plunge to try to be a full-time author, and I did it after I had my first book published. Was trying to get a second book published. I got a contract, And then I thought, well, okay, so here's how this is going to go. I've got one book, I've got another book, I've got another book lined up after that, and I've got this novel, so I can get all those published. It'll be great, and I'll make all kinds of money. And no, that's not what happened, but I did get the books published. You know, this is going to sound funny, but they came out actually too quickly, one after another, at the beginning when I didn't know enough about how to promote them. So unfortunately, my novel did not do very well because nobody knew it was there. I didn't know how to promote it, and so I'm actually hoping to re-release it this year. So
will that mean that you're going to, with some of your books, join the hybrid movement?
Yes, I believe that might happen this year. I'm working on it.
You know a lot about, I've got Catherine Ryan Hyder's coming on the show, and I've got Brett Battles who's coming on the show, and both of them are legacy authors who take portions of their books that they now have their rights for, and they then go the indie route. I think it's the future, don't you? I mean, what writer would not do that?
I think it's smart to stick one leg in traditional publishing if you're already there, to continue with that, and to take one leg and stick it in the indie publishing world, because you know, we could talk about that for hours, but you know, you just don't make as much money or have as much control as many of us would like with traditional publishing. However, there is some cachet and, you know, the vetting and the publicity that some of the big publishers do for you, but less and less, as you know. I just, you know, I am going to be trying it, and I hope it goes well to do both. So I'm going to give it a shot.
Well, I think that just makes sense. I think that what's happening in the indie movement is that the indie authors are doing what you're doing, only the reverse. They're attempting to sell as many indie books as they can, get the attention of legacy, and then go and do print runs with legacy. I think that's just the way the future is going to be in publishing. New York isn't going to go away. Those houses aren't going to collapse, and Indie's not going to go away. So we're going to find a marriage, I think, eventually. And it's really one of the reasons why I launched this show, because there's so much to learn from legacy authors as yourself, and also there's a lot to learn from the hybrid authors. Catherine Ryan Hyde will be one that will come on and teach you lots of stuff about, you know, how to keep one foot in one and one foot in the other. But as you said, Caitlin, we could go on and on about that. But let's talk about your books. What are you doing, if you don't mind, right now? What are you doing for your true crime that just came out in January?
Well, do you mean in terms of promotion?
Yeah, like how are you doing it? Are you doing a mixed bag? Are you is your house helping you? And I'm sorry, I didn't say what house you're with right now, but you've been with several publishing houses, correct?
Yes. This book is Kensington Pinnacle.
Okay.
I've had Poison Love, Body Parts, Lost Girls, Dead Reckoning, and then this one is my 5th book. I am now working on my 6th book with them, which will be due out in November of 2015.
Wow.
So they do very limited amounts of promotion, so I am expected to do a lot of it. They do send out books, you know, if I give them a list, and they have their own list. But in general, I am pretty much expected to drum up as much publicity as I can, and I've been doing this now mostly myself for many years, and so I do have contacts in TV on investigation discovery.
Good.
I know a lot of producers by now, and when, you know, they're open to hearing pitches, or they come to me with a show that they're working on, or a new show, and they say, hey, could you get up to speed on this case that you've never heard of? And, you know, in one case last year, I read a bunch of court transcripts so that I could speak intelligently about a case that I really didn't know much about at all, other than reading a couple news stories. So that's been happening to help build my platform, and I'm now, you know, a crime expert after writing all these true crime books.
You sure are.
And I do anything that I possibly can with terrestrial radio.
Cool.
And, you know, and what I'm also noticing is, because we have fewer and fewer newspapers caring about books, I actually had more publicity this time from little tiny weekly newspapers when I would do an event. They'd cover something, you know, at a library, even if it wasn't, you know, hugely attended. I at least got something in the newspaper for a local audience, which helps, you know, build build up the publicity around the book, around the, so it's
one of the things that I want to just dovetail with what you just said, Caitlin, is that we should not be ignoring our community and our regional newspapers and magazines, because more than ever they're hunting for content, because there's so many places to put it now. Writers might be delightfully surprised to contact an editor and have them say yes instead of no. Also, I want our listeners to go on your site and take a look at CaitlinRother.com, because of course it has all of your books on it, but it also has video snippets of your interviews on TV. And so if you want to see how a true crime author is building their platform on their website, I think that your website is a very nice example of that.
Thank you. I also have another page. It's not only do I have that on the home page, I have an entire page on the newsroom page, which is a lot of links to interviews with me, interviews I've done with other people, stories I've written, and op-eds and all kinds of other things, blogs, whatever, written about me and written by me. So,
one of the reasons why I launched Literary Salon is to offer entertainment, number one, but some education. And so, or rather than education, maybe a little bit of tutorial. So for those listeners out there who are writing true crime, who are writing thrillers, who are writing whodunits, that kind of thing, can you give them some advice about what you should be doing in order to craft a story that is compelling, as true crime stories should be, or otherwise we wouldn't read them?
Well, I have been really kind of talking about this more lately. There is a big difference in my mind between a crime novel, fiction, and a true crime. You could call it a novel, although there's nothing in it that's made up. It's my books read like a novel. So I write narrative nonfiction, which is telling a true story using fiction techniques. And I don't know that all true crime writers do that, because not all true crime writers are actual professional writers. Some of them are detectives who decide to write a book. Some of them are former police officers or FBI agents or DEA agents or whatever, and they've been investigators, but they aren't writers necessarily. So the true crime genre is, I think, pretty different depending on who's actually writing the book. So you have people who have been writers and been authors, and their books are going to probably read differently, probably more in the style that I write. So, but one thing that I'm really pushing lately is, people expect true crime books to be full of violence, and I can't speak for all true crime books, period, but I can tell you that in my books, I try not to include violence, even though I'm writing about murder. And people say, well, how do you write about murder without writing about violence? And I say, well, I am aiming for more of a mainstream audience. So I think true crime has, connotations with people who've never read it. They don't like it. They don't want to read it. They think it's going to be gross or gruesome or gory. And I just like to say that my books, and I can only speak for myself, I really try to go for a psychological angle, because I think that's what's interesting to more people. And I think even the true crime hardcore addicts who are looking for that will still get what they want. And if they want the sensationalistic gore, they're not going to find it in my books. And
you made a conscious decision to do that, Caitlin.
I absolutely did, because of the reception that I get and the perception out there that it's gross and they don't want to read it. It's fine for people, I think, to read, people like Lee Childs and Patricia Cornwell. They've got torture in their books and all kinds of violence, but it's fiction. Now, I don't read those kind of books. I don't have the stomach for that, which people may find ironic. Here I am writing about real murder, and I will literally turn off a movie or put a book down that has graphic violence in it, because I don't want that in my brain. And so people say to me, "Oh, I don't want to read your book because I can't think about those things." So I can only speak for myself, but like I said, tell a story about the people. Try to answer the question, why do people do such horrible things to other people? What happened in their lives to make them do those things? That's what I find interesting, and that's what I think more people than just a basic true crime audience will enjoy.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just apply what you just said to I'll Take Care of You.
Okay.
Could you, because I know that you have some background in psychology, and I was a therapist for many years, and I'm always more interested in motivation than
Yes.
pretty much anything else. And what I hear you saying is that is what you're interested in, from
Absolutely.
both the victim's point of view and also from the perpetrator's point of view. You want to know. So when you take, is this fair to say, when you take on these stories, it is your intention to go as deep as you can on both perp and victim to help readers understand how the hell this happened.
Pretty much. That's a very good way to say it. And with Lost Girls, which is a story of Chelsea King and Amber Dubois, two teenagers who were raped and murdered here in San Diego area by John Gardner, who was a sexual predator. I had the opportunity, and I call this an opportunity because it was very difficult to coordinate, and I feel like I was really able to tell the truth and reveal things that I've not been able to reveal in any other type of book. And I got, it was a very controversial book. So I was able to really get into John Gardner's head, and I did that by telling the story of his incredibly dysfunctional family. Yeah. And I was able to do that by getting cooperation with his mother, because his story is her story, and it all started because she was an incest molestation victim. She was a rape victim, and it was in their family. And so, it was one of these nature-nurture debates, and so it was fascinating for me, and I thought really important to help people understand, because I didn't know what a sexual predator really was about, and most people don't know that either because it's such a horrible thing. Now, with I'll Take Care of You, there wasn't that same sort of opportunity. I was not able to interview Nanette Packard, who was really the main character in this book, because she's the one that manipulated everybody and seduced everybody. She lied, she stole, she cheated, she was fascinating in a whole other completely different way. So what I did was basically show her MO throughout the book. And even though I was not able to interview her, I was able to include all kinds of stories from the people she seduced and manipulated and stole from. And that's kind of how I do it. So I'm able to show people, which is good writing too, show don't tell.
It is good writing.
Show her MO, and as a lesson for people, what to look for. So if they run into a con woman like this, or a con man, how to protect themselves and how to prevent tragedies like this from happening again.
Interesting, because when you talk about show in terms of showing what a psychopath looks like, you have to have, and so I hope that listeners hear this, you have to have a baseline understanding of the people that you're writing about. And in order to do that, you have to really dig deep into wherever you're going. And so for you, I haven't read I'll Take Care of You yet, but I know from Lost Girls that you never really use the words psychopath or any kind of DSM diagnosis. You show us these people.
Right.
And so I'm guessing with your protagonist in I'll Take Care of You, you're going to show us how this woman just absolutely manipulated everybody. I mean, it's just who she was, right?
Right. And I really, I'm glad you brought up the DSM, because even though I was a psychology major, I've written a number of books about people with mental health issues. I covered mental health when I was at the newspaper. And I've, my late husband had a personality disorder. I mean, I know personally and professionally a lot more than I wish I did about mental illness, but I am not a psychologist. I am not in the business of diagnosing people, so I really tried not to use specific diagnostic terminology in my books, because I'm not qualified to do that. If I can get my hands on a psychological report or testimony by an expert who says, or the person themselves tells me I was diagnosed as such and such, which I did in Dead Reckoning with Skylar DeLeon, who was a psychopathic liar. Sorry to use the word, but pathological liar. But he did tell me some of the diagnoses that he got, and you know what? I looked him up, and they seemed to match his behavior. So that's more of what I try to do is, yes, as you say, show you how it works. And I'll give you, in an interview, I may say, yes, I think, most murderers are narcissists, and they probably do have narcissistic personality disorder. Some of them have borderline personality disorder.
You bet. And all three.
Right.
Sociopath, narcissist,
right.
Yeah, all three. But I make a point of this because when Jane Smiley was on in our last episode, one of the things that she does very well is she shows through her characterization emotion. She never says sad. She never says rarely. And you're telling us essentially the same thing.
Absolutely.
And what I want listeners to hear, and probably they're rolling their eyes at me right now, is that in order to do that, it takes a lot of understanding and experience with craft.
Right.
And you've got, what, 20-some years?
Yes.
And I should tell our listeners that I met you at the Southern California Writers Conference about a year ago when you were keynoting and on the dais talking about lost girls, and I went up to you immediately and said, I knew I had to get to know you. But you're also going to be coming to the Santa Barbara Writers Conference in June, and you will be keynoting there as well. And that book, the book that you'll be talking about, or at least including, is I'll Take Care of You. Do you have any sense of what you might be talking about at that keynote address in June, Caitlin?
Well, I think what I'm going to be talking about is some of the issues that we've been talking about.
Good.
This thing about violence is really, it's like my mission right now, is to kind of talk to people about true crime and about what's interesting. And I think in general, we have so much violence in our society right now. How much do we really need in our pleasure reading? And how much do people really want? And is it good for us? And I don't mean to take a moral high ground or anything. I'm not trying to do that. But for me personally, my contribution is I don't have any violence in I'll Take Care of You. I have no violence. I have, in the opening pages of the book, a man is shot, but you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
His son hears the gunshots, comes down, and sees his father on the floor, calls 911. That's as much violence as you get in this book. So it's all psychological. It's all about, the investigation and the trials and the strategy. And it was a cold case, so there were actually 2 investigations. And I found that fascinating. How did they actually pull this together? How did she get away with it? What was she doing in those 15 years that she was out and about spending other people's money and getting cosmetic surgery and, doing her thing to man after man? And lesson learned. The Real Housewives of Orange County gone bad.
Boy, that's I was going to say they got nothing on her because she was quite the femme fatale.
She was.
We're getting close to that 30-minute mark, and one of the things that I ask my authors to do, if they're comfortable, is sharing a reading, just a small reading, and for you, I'm hoping that it will be a portion that illustrates what we've been talking about, which is show don't tell. And while are you good?
No.
Do you have a little something for us?
What I actually wanted to read was, I try to, even though murder is a very serious topic, I do want to show, the readers parts of life that, we can all learn from. And if the people who've been victims of people like Nanette Packard are willing to talk to me, and I want to get the reader's attention, I sometimes use a little humor. And so I thought I would share something right here with that, and this is actually a telling part, not a showing part, but you'll get the idea.
Which book is this, Caitlin?
This is I'll Take Care of You, and just to kind of
if you don't mind, while you're reading it, I'm going to screen share I'll Take Care of You.
Perfect.
Okay.
So just to kind of walk you up to this scene, Nanette has met this guy in a bar, and she's basically, talking him up, and basically said, I don't have anywhere to go tonight, and so, not one to ignore an obvious opportunity to take an attractive and willing woman home, this guy, Tom Reynolds, is going to take her back to his apartment. So here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Months later, he learned that Nanette had nowhere else to go that night because she'd been evicted from her apartment for not paying rent. There was no courtship and no dating. Nanette just never left. What started as a one-night stand sped straight into a hot and heavy sexual tryst, followed by a relatively quick decision to move in together at her new place, a two-bedroom duplex that had just been remodeled out of a two-story home. Because it was unfurnished and she had no job, Nanette expected Reynolds to pay the move-in expenses and buy all new furniture. Within the next several months, Reynolds' life and his relationship with Nanette would take a short trip to hell, putting him $91,000 in debt with a domestic violence arrest on his record and a bankruptcy filing to boot. And that's basically my setup to where I show you in the next 3 or 4 pages how she did that.
And if that doesn't make someone want to turn the page, I don't know what would.
Well, good.
Yeah, seriously. And so when you are, and this is I'll Take Care of You on Amazon, and of course people can purchase it now. But I would very much encourage people to, let's see if I can now get out of that and come back to me as I'm chatting. There I am.
There we go.
And so tell me just a little bit about when you got the assignment to, or when you decided that you wanted to write I'll Take Care of You. Tiny bit of that process. How does a true crime author snag a true crime story?
I was writing another book, actually, Dead Reckoning, talking to the same police department, Newport Beach Police Department, and working with the same prosecutor in Orange County. And I was on the phone with the police detective and emailing with him, and he basically said he was preparing some arrest warrants for this case. And so I said, well, tell me about it. And he started telling me about it, and I'm like, wow. Yeah, this was in 2009. Wow. So look how long it took for the book to come out, and I was still working on the other book, which was several books ago. And I immediately email my editor and try to put dibs on it, essentially. And as I just found out just very recently, there was another true crime author who actually pitched the same story, and I got it, according to him, because my editor told him, well, she knows these people, so she gets it. Mm-hmm. So that was great. And so, yeah, so I was waiting for the trials. I ended up going to the trials. I had to go to 2 trials, 90 minutes, 2 hours away each way, wow. Which is not cheap.
Wow.
Really? Stay in the hotels and sometimes, or just drive back, and go from there. Basically, write it, and I had to convince my editor even after all that. She didn't really like the story at first, so I had to put together an actual proposal and really convince her that this was a good story. And then, of course, then she loved it.
Well, I don't know. She must have been living in another world at that time, because this story's got everything in it. It's got greed, it's got arrogance, it's got it all.
Well, but see, the thing is, there's another thing for people to know, that true crime, the market is actually a soft market. It's a slow but steady selling market, and you don't get big hits in true crime. So you can't, it's pretty unusual to have like a really big seller that's a true crime book. So they're careful. They're very conservative. There aren't very many publishers who do true crime, and so it's a tough market, and it doesn't pay much. So just so people know.
and here you are, Caitlin Rother. You gave up a
yes.
a fab job at the San Diego Tribune. Was it there?
The San Diego Union Tribune, and I just got tired of. I was covering politics and government, and to be honest, this just seems less dirty. So
interesting way of putting it. But I'll wrap this up by telling people that you walked away from a job where you and your team were Pulitzer Prize nominated for a pretty fabulous story down in San Diego, and you, even after all that, walked away from it so that you could carve your own path in true crime. And I hope that people hear the caution in your voice, and also the amount of hard work. I mean, just driving 2 hours to sit in a courtroom and holding back. I mean, you have to be pretty dedicated.
Yes.
In order to do that. And it also is necessary if that book is going to read true, yes?
Right.
You've got to go there. You've got to spend that kind of time. And so for those listening to us, I'm going to end this interview now. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've had fun. And sorry for the initial glitch, but boy, we kept going. I'm like thrilled. So for my listeners, thank you so much for tuning into Literary Salon, learning prose from the pros. Caitlin Rother will be at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference June 7th through June 12th. I don't know what night she's going to be keynoting, but if you haven't signed up for that conference and you got a few extra pennies in your pocket, I really would. It's a fabulous conference, and not only will Caitlin Rother be on the dais, but so will Jane Smiley. And until my next episode, episode 4, I'm not sure who that's going to be yet. This is Marla Miller from marlamiller.com, thanking you for tuning in. And Caitlin Rother, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was fun.
It was fun. Thank you.
Bye.